The great chamber of the Galactic Council sat in the center of Nexus Station, a place where the most powerful species in the known galaxy came to decide the fate of trillions. The walls glowed with soft blue light, and the seats arranged in a circle represented 12 different civilizations. Kale, a Verdian observer, stood near the back of the chamber. Their forearms were folded carefully, their gray skin reflecting the light as they watched the proceedings with keen interest. The news had arrived 3 hours ago. The Zarathan Empire, a militaristic civilization that had been quiet for 2 decades, had launched a coordinated attack on the Outer Rim territories. 3 colonies had already been destroyed. 2 more were under heavy assault. The alarm systems throughout the station had wailed for the first time in anyone's memory. Now the council was in chaos. Ambassador Trenkar of the Krell stood at the center, his massive bulk dominating the space. The Krell were known for their perfect military formations and their logical approach to warfare. He spoke with the confidence of a species that had never lost a war. His voice boomed through the chamber. We recommend immediate defensive fortifications around the remaining Rim territories. The Zarathan Empire is powerful, yes, but we can withstand them. Councillor Mext of the Xenyari disagreed. The Xenyari were ancient, older than most of the species present, and they spoke rarely. When they did speak, others listened. Mex's voice was thin and whistling, like wind through a canyon. Conflict should be avoided. We should open diplomatic channels with the Zarathan leadership. Perhaps this aggression can be explained and resolved through negotiation. A dozen other voices joined the debate. The Thornic representative suggested a pooled military response led by all the major species. The Quillian delegation proposed sending aid to help civilians evacuate. The Shelver offered their advanced medical ships to treat the wounded. No. One spoke about actual victory. Kale listened carefully, recording everything in their datapad. The Verdians were observers, not participants. They had chosen long ago to remain neutral in all galactic conflicts, instead studying how civilizations behaved in times of crisis. Kale had been assigned to this station for 7 years, and they had seen many crises. None of them had prepared them for what happened next. Commander Nathan Brooks stood up from the human delegation seat. He was a tall man with dark hair and the kind of focused expression that suggested he made important decisions before breakfast every morning. His uniform was simple, just blue with a few insignia that Kale did not fully understand. He moved to the center of the chamber, not asking permission first, which was unusual. The council members turned to look at him. With respect, Nathan said, his voice steady and clear. We are talking about this wrong. We are talking about how to lose slowly instead of how to win. The chamber went silent. Ambassador Trenkar made a sound that was something like a laugh from a crow. Human, your species has been a member of this council for only 15 years. You are new to galactic politics. The Zarathan are a mature military power. There is no quick victory against them. We are not saying there is a quick victory, Nathan replied. He gestured to the woman sitting beside him. This was Ambassador Elisa Grant, the other human representative. She nodded to confirm his words. We are saying we should lead a direct military intervention. We have the numbers, we have the strategies, and we have something else that matters. And what is that? Mext of the Xenyari asked. There was curiosity in the whistling sound of their voice. Nathan looked directly at the ancient council member. We have people willing to die for something beyond themselves. The Zarathan expect you to fight like you always do. They expect you to follow your learned strategies and your careful formations. They do not expect anyone to be willing to lose everything. Kale recorded this moment carefully. It was unusual. Most species in the galaxy fought because they had to, because there was something at stake. The concept of fighting because you were willing to lose something seemed almost foreign to the careful diplomatic corps of the Galactic Council. Counselor Trenkar spoke again. You would risk your people based on willingness? That is not a strategy, human. That is desperation. No, Nathan said. It is trust. You should try it sometime. What happened next surprised everyone, including Kale. Instead of arguing further, Nathan and Lisa submitted a formal proposal. The Galactic Council would grant humanity the lead role in the military response to the Zerithan threat. All other species would support the human command structure. If humans failed, the full galactic military would assume control. But humanity should be given one chance. The debate that followed lasted 2 more hours. The Verdians expected the Council to reject the proposal outright. It violated centuries of precedent. It gave a young species command over older, more established civilizations. But something in Nathan's confidence seemed to reach even the skeptical council members. The vote came down to 8 in favor and 4 abstaining. The Thornak, the Quillian, the Shelver, and surprisingly the Xeniari all voted in favor. The Krell and several others abstained, which was as close to approval as they would give. Humanity would lead the response to the Zerithan invasion. As the council adjourned, Kale made a decision. They approached Nathan and Lisa before the humans left the chamber. Their 4 arms moved in the respectful gesture of the Verdians. Commander Brooks, Ambassador Grant, I would like to request permission to observe your military operation firsthand. The Verdians document all significant events in galactic history. This should be documented. Nathan smiled, a very human expression that showed his teeth. You want to see if we fail? I want to understand what you are trying to do, Kale said carefully. Your words today were different from the way other species speak about war. Come along then, Lisa said. She had a kind expression. You might learn something unexpected. Kale boarded the neutral observation vessel the next morning. The ship was small and fast, equipped with the best recording equipment the Verdians had developed. As Kale watched through the viewport, human military ships began to move away from the station. They did not move in perfect formations like the Krull would. Instead, they moved with a kind of organized chaos that Kale found very difficult to analyze. The human commander had promised them a chance to prove something. Kale had come to watch them fail. But as they traveled toward the Outer Rim territories and the growing conflict, Kale wondered if there was something about this species that the rest of the galaxy had not yet understood. The observation post was activated near the edge of the conflict zone. Kale settled in to record what they believed would be humanity's final stand against a superior enemy. They had no idea that they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of what it meant to be alive in a dangerous galaxy. The human fleet gathered at a staging area near the Outer Rim. Kale watched from the observation post as 73 ships moved into position. The number seemed small compared to what the Verdian intelligence report said about Zerithan forces. From a purely mathematical standpoint, humans were outnumbered. From a logical standpoint, they should not have agreed to fight. But humans did not seem to operate on logic alone. Kale began to understand this on the second day of observation. Commander Nathan Brooks held a briefing that was broadcast across the entire human fleet. Kale accessed the transmission through their monitoring systems. What they saw was unexpected. Nathan did not talk about strategy first. He talked about the people. He named the 3 colonies that have been destroyed. He named the families that have been lost. He spoke about Dr. Marcus Chen, a scientist on the first colony, who had been studying plant genetics to help grow food on difficult worlds. He spoke about Officer Rita Coleman, who's been a mother of 2 and had been leading evacuation efforts when the Zerithan struck. He spoke about thousands of people who would never grow old, never see their families again, never accomplish the dreams they had held. We are going to win this, Nathan said. His voice was steady and hard. Not because we are better soldiers. Not because we have superior weapons. We are going to win because we know what we are fighting for. We are fighting so that the children on Rim Colony 7 will grow up safe. We are fighting so that no more families will be torn apart. We are fighting because we choose to. Kale recorded everything but did not understand the point of this speech. The soldiers already knew the stakes. Why did the commander need to remind them of the emotional weight of their mission? Then Kale began to monitor individual soldiers. This was where the real shock came. Captain Owen Hayes commanded the fighter squadron that would serve as the first line of defense. Kale watched through multiple observation feeds as Owen met with his pilots one by one. Each meeting lasted about 10 minutes. Owen would listen while the pilots spoke about their family, their hopes, their fears. Kale heard Owen asking Ensign Marcus Patterson about his daughter. Marcus had a daughter, 3 years old, who lived on a space station near Jupiter. She wanted to be an explorer when she grew up. Owen listened to this and nodded, genuinely interested. He did not dismiss the pilot or rush the conversation. He spent time understanding who this pilot was beyond just their military rating. The Verdian data banks held extensive information about soldier psychology across the galaxy. Efficient commanders did not waste time on personal connections. Efficient commanders treated their personnel as units to be deployed, not as individuals with families. The most effective military forces the Verdians had studied operated on principle of emotional distance. The Krell had never once held a conversation like the one Kale was watching between Owen and his pilots. Yet Owen continued, meeting with each of his 12 pilots, learning their stories, understanding their families. On the 4th day, Dr. Victoria Brooks arrived at the command center. She was not a military officer. She was a scientist, a civilian, and she had been working on the second colony when the Zarathan attacked. Her research team had consisted of 8 people. All 8 were dead. Victoria herself had barely escaped on a cargo transport. Kale expected Victoria to be broken, unable to function. Instead, she went directly to the laboratories that had been set up in the human fleet and began to work. Kale observed her for 16 hours straight. Victoria did not sleep. She did not eat. She had access to the sensor data from the Zarathan attack. She was analyzing it, looking for patterns in the way the Zarathan weapons worked. She was searching for weaknesses. Nathan found her in the laboratory near midnight on the first day. Victoria was crying as she worked, tears running down her face, but her hands did not shake as she entered data into the computer system. Her focus was absolute. "You do not have to do this," Nathan said gently. "You can rest. You can grieve." Victoria looked up at her brother. Nathan and Victoria were siblings, though Kale had not known this until checking the records. "I am grieving," Victoria said. "I am grieving by making sure their deaths mean something. I am grieving by finding a way to stop this from happening to anyone else." Nathan understood without needing more explanation. He sat down and helped her work, brother and sister laboring through the night to understand the weapons that had killed their colleagues. On the 6th day, Victoria found something. She came to the command center with data that showed a pattern in the Zarathan shield frequencies. Every Zarathan weapon system cycled its shield protection in a specific pattern. The cycle lasted for 2.3 seconds. During that 2.3 seconds, the shields dropped to 40% efficiency. "This is our opening," Victoria said, showing the data to Nathan and his tactical officers. "If we can time a coordinated strike to hit during this window, we can breach their defenses. We can damage their command structure." "How did you find this?" one of the officers asked. Victoria did not answer immediately. She looked at her hands, which were still shaking slightly. "The Zarathan are not very different from us. They follow patterns, because patterns are efficient. I just had to think like them and look for the moment when their efficiency becomes a vulnerability." What struck Kale most profoundly during these 6 days of observation was not the military preparation. It was the way humans seemed to function as a connected unit rather than as individual soldiers following orders. On the seventh day, Kale witnessed to something they had not expected. At 1900 hours, the human fleet gathered for a memorial service. Soldiers stood in their ship's corridors, in their barracks, in their fighter bays. Some of them prayed. Some of them stood in silence. Some of them spoke the names of people who had died on the colonies. The memorial lasted for 20 minutes. No one was forced to attend. No one was required to participate. Yet the participation was near total. Humans who had been enemies in sports competitions the week before stood together. Humans from different nations on Earth, humans who had competing interests, all gathered to honor the dead together. Kale had never seen anything like it. The Krell did not mourn in combat. The Xingari viewed death as a transition that required no ceremony. The Verdians documented loss with clinical precision. But humans seemed to understand that grief shared was grief that built solidarity. After the memorial ended, Kale heard conversations between soldiers. They spoke about the people they had lost. They spoke about their families waiting at home. They spoke about the uncertainty of whether they would return. They spoke openly, without fear of showing emotion. Kale made a note in their personal log. Humans are either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish. They understand that death is coming, and they face it without hiding from the truth. They have chosen to feel their fear and grief fully, and then they have chosen to fight anyway. The evening before combat was scheduled to begin, Nathan held a final address to the entire fleet. Kale watched through the broadcast feed as he stood in the central command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the locations of Zarathan ships. "Tomorrow we fight," Nathan said. "Some of us will not come back. I want you to know that I understand this. I want you to know that your sacrifice will matter. The colony on Rim 7 has 40,000 children who will grow up in a free galaxy because of what we do tomorrow. The families scattered across human space will sleep safely because of your courage." Nathan paused, and Kale could see the weight of command pressing down on him. "If I fall tomorrow, Captain Owen Hayes will take command. Trust him as you have trusted me. If he falls, his second will lead. We have built something here in these 6 days. We have built trust. We have built connection. That is what will keep us alive tomorrow. That is what will help us win." As the transmission ended, Kale thought about the Zarathan. The Zarathan had superior weapons. The Zarathan had superior numbers. The Zarathan had experience and technology. But the Zarathan had not expected to face an enemy that would fight not just to win, but to protect something beyond themselves. Kale understood that tomorrow would determine if that expectation was correct. The Zarathan fleet appeared on the sensors at 0600 hours. 123 ships of the line, each one larger than anything the human fleet possessed. The flagship alone was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that had been designed over centuries of warfare. The Zarathan had conquered 17 systems. They had fought and defeated every major power in their region of space. They had come to the Outer Rim expecting to add another colony to their empire. What they did not expect was human tactical flexibility. Kale watched the opening engagement through multiple sensor feeds. The Zarathan commander, whose name translated roughly as Destroyer of Worlds, broadcast a message to the human fleet. His voice was deep and layered, as if multiple Zarathan were speaking at once. This was actually how their species communicated, overlapping voices creating meaning through harmonic resonance. "Surrender, human fleet, and you will be processed as valuable specimens. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Nathan's response was immediate. "This is Commander Nathan Brooks of the human fleet. You can take your offer and your arrogance and leave this space right now. If you advance 1 more kilometer toward those colonies, Every Zarathan on this field will die. The Zarathan commander did not even bother to respond to the threat. His fleet began to advance. The human fighters launched at 0607 hours. Captain Owen Hayes' squadron of 12 fighters moved forward in a formation that broke every rule of military geometry that the Verdians had ever documented. Instead of moving in lines, the fighters scattered in a pattern that appeared to be random but was actually carefully coordinated. Kale watched through the tactical displays as Owen communicated with his pilots in real time. Every few seconds, he adjusted their course based on the movement of enemy fighters. The Zarathan pilots flew in perfect formations, just as Kale had expected. They were faster, more heavily armed, and more experienced. They were also predictable. When a Zarathan fighter locked onto one of the human pilots, the human fighter did not attempt to outrun the enemy. Instead, 3 other human fighters converged on the Zarathan position. They could not match the enemy's speed, but they could move in ways the Zarathan did not expect. Patterson, break left. Owen commanded. Ensign Marcus Patterson, the pilot with the 3-year-old daughter, rolled his fighter hard to the left. A laser bolt from the pursuing Zarathan fighter missed him by meters. But the maneuver had brought Patterson into range of 2 other human pilots who immediately fired on the Zarathan fighter. The Zarathan fighter exploded. It was not a clean victory. Another human fighter, piloted by Officer David Costa, took damage from the explosion. His fighter was smoking, and he had to fall back from the front lines. But he did not eject. He moved to a defensive position where other human ships could cover for him. "I am still functional," David reported. "Just compensating for engine damage." "We see you," Owen said. "Silva, move up to cover Costa's position." Officer Amanda Silva adjusted her trajectory instantly, moving into formation with David. 2 seconds later, a pair of Zarathan fighters attempted to capitalize on the damaged ship. But Amanda was already there, guns blazing, driving them off. Kale began to understand what they were witnessing. The human fleet was not fighting to win quickly or efficiently. They were fighting to keep each other alive. Every pilot was covered by at least 2 others. When someone took damage, the entire formation adjusted to compensate. When someone was in danger, others moved without hesitation to help. On the larger battlefield, the human cruisers were engaging the Zarathan destroyer escorts. The numbers still favored the Zarathan, but the human ships were moving with remarkable coordination. Nathan had positioned his forces not to maximize firepower, but to maximize survivability. The human capital ship, the Galahad, took a massive hit from a Zarathan destroyer. The impact shook the entire vessel, and emergency alarms screamed through the corridors. But instead of retreating, the Galahad moved closer to the Zarathan destroyer, its shields angling to protect the smaller human frigate that was taking heavy fire. Kale heard Nathan's voice through the communication channel. "All ships, this is Galahad Command. We take them down together or not at all. Stay in formation. Cover your wingmates. Do not break ranks." 4 hours into the engagement, Kale began to see the human strategy working. Zarathan losses were mounting slightly faster than human losses. Not by much, but the trend was moving in the human direction. This was not supposed to be possible. The Zarathan had never lost a battle where they had superior numbers and firepower. The turning point came when Victoria's analysis proved correct. Nathan had saved it for this moment, when the Zarathan had become confident enough to push forward with minimum caution. The timing was perfect. "All ships, fire on the marked targets," Nathan commanded. A coordinated volley of human fire concentrated on 3 Zarathan destroyers at the exact moment when their shields cycled down. The strike was not overwhelming in raw power, but it was precise. The shields dropped to 40%, just as Victoria had calculated. The human weapons breached the outer hull of the nearest Zarathan destroyer. The explosion was massive. Secondary detonations cascaded through the Zerathan ship. Its power systems failed. Its weapons went silent. A Zerathan destroyer, a ship that had never been defeated, began to sink into space in a shower of debris and dying energy. The other Zerathan fleets slowed their advance. For the first time, they had lost a capital ship, but the cost was high. The human frigate that had been protected by the Galahad had taken multiple hits during the concentrated bombardment. Kale watched as its crew worked frantically to contain the damage. Fire spread through the lower decks. Officers called for evacuation procedures. Captain Darius Morrison commanded the frigate. Darius was a young officer, only 32 years old, and this was supposed to be his last deployment. He had been planning to transfer to a teaching position at a human military academy. He had a family waiting for him on the colony worlds. Darius stayed at his post even as the fires spread. He made sure every crew member had a chance to reach the evacuation pods. His final act was to trigger the ship's auto-destruct sequence. The detonation would not be powerful enough to threaten the Zerathan ship, but it would buy time for his people to escape. Captain Morrison? Nathan's voice came through the communication channel. All crew accounted for, Darius said calmly. Evacuation complete. I'm staying to make sure they make it out. Nathan understood what that meant. There was no time to send a rescue shuttle. The ship was going to explode in 90 seconds. Thank you, Nathan said simply. Darius did not respond. He did not have time. The frigate exploded, and he was gone. Ensign Patterson, the young pilot who fought above the battle, heard the explosion through the fleet communication channel. His squad mates heard it. Every pilot in the human fleet heard the sound of a ship dying, and a captain making the choice to go down with his people. The response was immediate and fierce. The human pilots became more aggressive, more willing to take risks. Owen Hayes called for a full squadron engagement against the nearest Zerathan fighter group. The human pilots attacked with a ferocity that shocked even the observing Verdian. They were not fighting to win anymore. They were fighting for revenge. They were fighting for Captain Darius Morrison. 3 Zerathan fighters fell in the next 2 minutes. Kale recorded everything, understanding now that they were not watching a simple military conflict. They were watching something far more profound. They were watching a species to sacrifice over survival, and in doing so, they were becoming something that the galaxy had never fully seen before. The human fleet was transforming grief into weaponry, and the Zerathan did not know how to defend against that. The battle continued for 14 hours without pause. Kale watched the casualty counts rise steadily. The human fleet had lost 9 ships and had suffered heavy damage to another 14. The Zerathan had lost 4 ships and were showing signs of regrouping. The enemy was adjusting their tactics, learning from the humans. Understanding their approach. Nathan knew they could not sustain the current pace. The human fleet would eventually be overwhelmed by sheer numbers and attrition. They needed something dramatic. They needed something that would break the Zerathan will to fight. At hour 14, Nathan made a decision that no other species would have made. He ordered a maneuver that left the human fleet vulnerable. He ordered a full retreat toward the Zerathan fleet, a move that would create a collision course if both sides maintained their current speed. The tactical officers on the Galahad called it suicide. Sir, this maneuver will expose our rear flank, one officer said desperately. I know, Nathan replied. The Zerathan commander will see our retreat and think we are broken. He will push forward. When he pushes forward, we will respond with maximum force. This will be our moment to strike at his command ship. The maneuver required perfect coordination. Every human ship had to move in exactly the right way at exactly the right moment. If even one ship failed to adjust correctly, the entire fleet formation would fall apart. Kale watched the data flow from every human vessel. Seeing the moment of engagement approach. Nathan gave the order. Every human ship reversed course and accelerated toward the Zarathan formation. It was madness. It was brilliant. The Zarathan commander fell for the trap. He pushed his fleet forward harder, believing he had finally broken human resistance. His capital ship, the massive command vessel at the center of the Zarathan formation, advanced with confidence. Human fire erupted from the converging fleet. Every human ship focused their weapons on the Zarathan positions. The unexpected assault caught the enemy unprepared. 2 more Zarathan destroyers took catastrophic damage. The command ship shields flared under the sudden assault. Captain Owen Hayes' fighter squadron dove at the Zarathan command vessel from above, firing everything they had. Owen himself targeted the main weapon system, knowing that his fighters could not penetrate the heavy armor of the command ship's hull. But the weapon system had less protection. It was designed to face enemy ships that would attack from a distance, not from close range. Owen's fighter took multiple hits as he approached. His shields were failing. His engines were damaged. He knew he was going to die. He fired anyway. The weapon system exploded in a shower of energy and shattered metal. Owen's fighter, already on the edge of complete failure, was caught in the secondary explosion. The small ship tumbled through space, no longer responding to any input. "Captain?" Ensign Patterson's voice crackled through the communication channel. "Captain Hayes?" Another pilot called out. Owen did not respond immediately. His fighter was spinning, and his console was dark. Cale watched the sensor reading of his ship move chaotically through space. For 5 terrible seconds, there was only silence. Then Owen's voice came through, damaged and painful. "I am here. Fighters regroup on my position. Let's finish this." Owen's fighter was crippled, but he was still alive. And he was still fighting. The human ships pressed forward, taking advantage of the damage they had inflicted. The Zarathan formation was breaking apart. Ships that had fought in perfect coordination for thousands of engagements were suddenly unable to maintain their formation. The human assault was too coordinated, too willing to accept damage in exchange for striking at critical enemy positions. Nathan pushed the fleet harder. He ordered every operational ship to focus fire on the Zarathan command vessel. The massive ship was taking hit after hit. Its shields were failing. Its armor was being breached. For the first time in Zarathan history, a command ship was in real danger of being destroyed. The Zarathan commander made a critical error. Instead of retreating to protect the command ship, he ordered a maximum assault on the human forces around him. He believed overwhelming firepower would drive the humans back. Instead, it left his ship vulnerable. Cale watched as Nathan orchestrated his response. It was like watching a musician play a perfect symphony. Every human ship moved to support the others. Every defensive position was covered. Every attack was coordinated with other attacks. The human fleet was no longer operating as individual units. They had become a single organism with a single purpose. Victoria had been working in the command center throughout the entire battle. She had been calculating and recalculating, looking for new weaknesses in the Zarathan systems. She had not slept in 36 hours. She had barely eaten. But she had discovered something that mattered. "Nathan," she said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "The power core. If we can target the power distribution system at coordinates Mark 7, we might be able to cascade a total power failure. It will take 3 simultaneous hits." Nathan looked at his sister, understanding the magnitude of what she was suggesting. If the power core failed, the Zarathan command ship would lose all systems. But the ship would also lose life support. "How many Zarathan are on that ship?" he asked. "Approximately 4,000, Victoria said quietly. "Nathan, I know what I am asking. But if we do not stop them here, they will keep attacking. They will keep killing. This ends now or it never ends." Nathan was silent for 3 seconds. Then he gave the order. 3 human cruisers targeted the power distribution system. They fired in perfect coordination. All 3 hits landed on the marked coordinates within 0.02 seconds of each other. The Zarathan command ship lost power across its entire structure. The massive vessel went dark. Life support systems failed. The command center where the Zarathan military leaders had planned the conquest of human space fell into darkness and silence. The Zarathan fleet was suddenly without unified command. Individual ships continued to fight, but without coordination, their superior numbers no longer mattered. Ships began to disengage. Ships began to retreat. Nathan gave the final order. All human ships, pursue the Zarathan retreat. Drive them back. Do not allow them to regroup. This ends now. The human fleet pursued, and the Zarathan retreat became a rout. 16 hours later, as the Zarathan ships jumped to faster than light speed and fled the outer rim, Nathan collapsed in his command chair. The battle was over. Humanity had won, but the cost was devastating. The human fleet had lost 19 ships. 847 human beings were dead. 3,000 more were wounded. The survivors were still pulling bodies from the rubble and the debris. Nathan called for a memorial service. He did not wait for recovery operations to complete. He did not wait for the fleet to return to a safe harbor. He ordered every human ship to stand down their weapons. He ordered every surviving crew member to gather wherever they could and remember the dead. The memorial lasted for only 20 minutes. But in those 20 minutes, Kale saw something that transcended simple military discipline. They saw grief acknowledged. They saw sacrifice honored. They saw a species understanding that their victory had a price, and that price was worth remembering. As the ceremony ended, Kale made a note in their observation log. Humans have won the battle. The Zarathan Empire has been driven back. But this victory was not won by superior weapons or better ships. It was won by humans being willing to accept death as the price of protecting others. The Zarathan attacked because they did not understand what they were facing. Now the galaxy must understand. Humans are not powerful because they are warriors. Humans are powerful because they choose to be. The recovery operations lasted for 8 days. Human ships moved through the debris field, searching for survivors in the wreckage of destroyed vessels. They found 43 people who had somehow survived in the vacuum, protected by emergency suits and the luck of space. They found the bodies of those who had not been so fortunate. They found pieces of ships and lives scattered across thousands of kilometers of empty space. Nathan did not rest. He did not accept comfort or medical attention for his own injuries. He moved from ship to ship, thanking the survivors, speaking with the wounded, honoring the dead. He spoke to Ensign Patterson, whose fighter had been badly damaged but had somehow limped back to the Galahad. He spoke to Officer Silva, who had saved a fellow pilot by ramming her own damaged fighter into a Zarathan interceptor. He spoke to Victoria, whose analysis and intelligence had made the victory possible. Kale continued their observations throughout the recovery period. They recorded images of human ships working to recover the dead. They recorded conversations between survivors, humans who had seen their friends die and who were choosing to process that grief through action rather than withdrawal. On the 9th day, Nathan held a fleet-wide transmission. Kale watched as the human commander appeared on screens throughout the fleet. He looked tired. He looked like someone who had not slept in a very long time. But his voice was steady. "We have won," Nathan said simply. "The Zarathan will not return to the outer rim. The colonies are safe. The children there will grow up in freedom because of what you did here. But we do not celebrate victory in the way some species do. We acknowledge the cost. We remember those who paid the price." He named every single person who had died. All 847 names. It took more than an hour. Nathan stood there and spoke each name, knowing that each name represented a life, a family, a future that would never happen. When the naming was complete, Nathan spoke again. You honored my leadership. You trusted me to make decisions that sometimes asked you to risk everything. I want you to know that I will carry the weight of every decision I made, every life that was lost, for the rest of my existence. I do not take that responsibility lightly. I will remember. We will all remember. The recovery operations complete. The human fleet began the long journey back to Rim Colony 7. It was the colony that had been most under threat. The one that housed the 40,000 children Nathan had spoken about. As the fleet approached, Cale watched something unexpected happen. Children began to broadcast messages through the communication channels. They did not know that space combat had happened so far away. They did not fully understand the danger they had been in. But they understood that the ships returning to them had fought to protect them. And they wanted to say thank you. A 7-year-old named Clara broadcast a message. She held a drawing she had made while the adults prepared for the possibility that the colony would need to evacuate. The drawing showed blue ships protecting smaller blue buildings. She had called it Heroes in Space. An 8-year-old named Tommy asked if the fighters had used rockets. Ensign Patterson, hearing the question, laughed for the first time since the battle ended. He responded to Tommy, explaining how the fighters actually worked. The two of them had a conversation that lasted 10 minutes. A man who had seen terrible violence speaking with a child, who only knew safety and innocence. Nathan experienced something that Cale had not expected. He experienced joy, not because the war was over or because humans had won, but because there was still life worth protecting. There were still children who could laugh and dream and ask about rockets. On the second day, after arriving at the colony, Nathan granted Cale permission to come down to the surface. The Verdian observer boarded a shuttle and descended through the atmosphere of the colony world. The landscape was beautiful, with green vegetation and blue water. It was a world that had nearly been destroyed, that had nearly lost everything. Nathan met Cale near the colony's main settlement. The human commander looked even more tired in person. He had a bandage on his left side where shrapnel had caught him during the battle. He moved carefully, favoring his right leg. "Thank you for coming," Nathan said. "I wanted to show you something." He led Cale through the settlement. Children played in the streets. Adults worked to repair buildings and systems. There was no sense of fear or desperation. There was instead a sense of purpose, a sense that this colony would continue, that life would go on. They arrived at a plaza where a memorial was being constructed. Cale read the names being carved into stone. These were the dead from the battle. Captain Darius Morrison, who had stayed with his ship so his crew could escape. Ensign Margaret Walsh, who had given her life protecting a human civilian transport. Officer William Cross, who had died holding a defensive position so that other ships could withdraw to safety. Nathan stood before the memorial and spoke to Cale. "You came to observe a military operation. You expected to document humanity's failure. What did you find instead?" Cale considered the question carefully. The Verdian observer had spent 2 decades studying this galaxy. They had never been asked to explain what they truly observed. They had been trained to be neutral, to record facts without interpretation. But standing on this colony world, looking at the memorial to the dead, Cale understood that they could not remain neutral. "I found," Cale said slowly, "a species that does not fight for conquest or power. I found people who fight because they choose to value something beyond their own survival. I found a civilization willing to lose everything for people they have never met, children they will never know. And I found that this makes your species dangerous in a way the galaxy does not yet fully comprehend." Nathan nodded. "The Galactic Council came to hear our report yesterday. They wanted to understand how we won against superior numbers. I told him what I am telling you. We won because we trusted each other. We won because we were willing to die for something beyond ourselves. We won because humanity has learned that life is precious, precisely because it is temporary and fragile. Over the next week, Cale conducted detailed interviews with survivors. They spoke with Owen Hayes, whose fighter had been crippled and who had still continued fighting. They spoke with Victoria, who had transformed her grief into knowledge that saved thousands of lives. They spoke with the pilots and officers and engineers who made the victory possible. The most profound conversation came with Ensign Patterson. Cale asked him why he had continued fighting even when his fighter was damaged. Even when he knew the danger was extreme. Patterson was quiet for a long moment. Because Captain Hayes was covering my position, he said finally. Because Officer Silva had saved my life. Because 3 of my friends had died that day, and I was not going to let their sacrifice mean nothing. And because out there on that colony, there is a girl named Clara who drew pictures of heroes. I wanted to be worthy of being in her picture. Cale recorded this moment and understood, finally, what made humanity exceptional. Other species had warriors and soldiers. Other species had military discipline and tactical intelligence. But humanity had something different. They had individuals who understood that their lives were connected to other lives, that their choices affected others, that survival itself was meaningless without something to survive for. Cale's report to the Galactic Council took 6 hours to deliver. The council members listened to descriptions of the battle, to casualty counts and tactical analysis. But what they truly needed to understand came at the end. Humans are not dangerous because they are more violent than us, Cale said. Humans are dangerous because they are willing to choose sacrifice. In a galaxy where most species fight to maximize their own survival, humans fight to protect others. In a galaxy where we make military decisions based on logic and advantage, humans make decisions based on honor and duty and love. We should not fear humans as warriors. We should fear humans as leaders, because they will ask others to follow them into death. And others will follow willingly, knowing that they serve something greater than themselves. The Council voted unanimously to accept humanity as a full member of the Galactic Alliance, with all the privileges and protections that status conveyed. More importantly, they began to understand that the Outer Rim would be safer under human protection than it had ever been before. 3 months after the battle, Cale received a personal message from Nathan Brooks. The human commander was being reassigned to establish a military academy that would teach the principles of human leadership to other species. He asked Cale if they would join him as an observer and documenter. Cale accepted. On the day that Cale left the observation post, they made a final entry in their personal log. The log had been maintained by Verdians for over 1,000 years, a record of significant galactic events and the species involved. Cale wrote, "I came to observe a military conflict and document the strengths and weaknesses of a young species. What I witnessed instead was the emergence of something extraordinary. I witnessed humans step onto a battlefield, knowing they might lose everything, and choosing to fight not for glory or wealth, but for the simple truth that some things are worth more than survival itself. The galaxy feared the Zarathan because they were strong.